You know, I've seen a lot of faces walk through that door, more than I can count. Each one carries a story, a burden, or sometimes just a thirst. But every now and then, someone comes in with a tale that, well, it just sticks with you. Like a good whiskey, it lingers on the palate long after the glass is empty. This one, it's like that. It's about a man named Arthur. A quiet fella, kept to himself mostly, but the kind who'd always leave a generous tip, even if he only ordered a seltzer. He'd come in, usually on a Tuesday, always around closing. He'd sit at the far end of the bar, nursing his drink, just watching the streetlights outside. He didn't talk much, not at first. But one night, after a particularly rough day for me, spilled a whole tray of glasses, argued with the delivery guy, he finally spoke. "Rough day, huh, bartender?" he said, his voice a low rumble, like distant thunder. I just grunted, wiping down the counter. "You have no idea, pal." He chuckled softly, a low, melancholic chuckle, almost a sigh. "Oh, I think I might. Life, it has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Or sometimes it throws you a whole new game you never signed up for." He paused, taking a slow sip of his seltzer. "You ever feel like you're living two lives at once?" That caught my attention. "Depends on what you mean, Arthur. Most of us put on a different face for work, for home, for the mirror sometimes." He shook his head, a faraway look in his eyes. "No, not like that. More like you're a custodian of a secret that defines your entire existence, yet you can never, ever speak of it." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw a deep, almost ancient sorrow in his eyes. "What would you do, bartender, if you found out your whole life, everything you believed to be true, was built on a lie? A lie designed to protect you, but a lie nonetheless?" I leaned against the bar, crossing my arms. "That's a heavy question, Arthur. I suppose I'd want to know the truth, no matter how ugly." He smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "That's what I thought too, until the truth found me." And that's how the story began, right there, late on a Tuesday night. Arthur started talking, slowly at first, piecing together fragments of a life he thought he knew, and the other life that had been hidden from him for decades. He told me about his childhood, growing up in a small, idyllic town, a perfect family, loving parents, a picture postcard life. But there was always a shadow, he said, a faint whisper of something not quite right. His mother, bless her soul, was a nervous woman, jumpy, easily startled. And his father, a stoic, hard-working man, had a way of looking at him sometimes, a look of deep affection mixed with a strange, almost anxious protectiveness, like he was constantly guarding a fragile secret. Arthur remembered one particular incident when he was about 10. He'd found an old, dusty photo album in the attic, tucked away in a forgotten box. Inside, he saw pictures of his parents, much younger, but there were also photos of a woman he didn't recognize, a beautiful woman, with eyes just like his. And in some of those pictures, she was holding a baby that looked uncannily like a younger version of himself. He'd shown the album to his mother, excited, asking who the woman was. My voice taking on a childlike wonder, then quickly changing to mimic a parent's hurried dismissal. "Who's this, Mom? She looks like me." His mother had frozen, then snatched the album from his hands, her face paling. "Just an old friend, dear. Nothing important. Now go play outside. It's a beautiful day." She'd never mentioned it again, and the album vanished. He tried to forget it, but the image of that woman, it haunted him. As he grew older, small things started to add up. His birth certificate, which always seemed a little too crisp, a little too new for its age. The way his parents would sometimes exchange a loaded glance when certain topics came up, like adoption or families. He'd dismiss it, of course. His parents loved him. They were his parents. End of story, right? Wrong. The real story began when Arthur was in his late 30s. His mother had passed away a few years prior, and his father was fading fast. One afternoon, Arthur was at the hospital, sitting by his father's bedside. His father, weak and frail, took his hand. "Son," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "There's something you need to know before I go." Arthur braced himself. He'd always known there was something. He just never imagined the magnitude of it. His father, with great effort, confessed. Arthur wasn't their biological son. He had been adopted, not through some agency, not through official channels, but through a desperate, heartbreaking arrangement with his true mother, a woman named Elena. Elena was a young, struggling artist. His father had known her from his younger days, before he met Arthur's adopted mother. They'd been close friends, and his father had always harbored a soft spot for her. Elena had become pregnant, unplanned, with a man who abandoned her. Desperate, alone, and with no means to raise a child, she had turned to Arthur's father. Your bass tone should be calm and reflective. Arthur's adopted mother, unable to have children of her own, was overjoyed at the prospect. They made a pact. Elena would give them the baby, and they would raise him as their own. In return, they would provide her with financial support discreetly for as long as she needed it. The condition was absolute secrecy. Elena wanted her son to have a stable, loving home, free from the stigma and difficulties she faced. She made them promise never to tell him, never to let him know the truth, for his own good. His father, his voice growing weaker with each word, explained that Elena had been present at his birth. She'd held him, just for a moment, before handing him over. She'd even helped choose his name, Arthur, a name she loved. After that, she'd moved away, starting a new life, never contacting them again. They had upheld their promise for all those years, a promise of silence. My tone here shifts to one of profound shock and a touch of indignation. So they just erased her? Erased you from her life? And her from yours? I asked Arthur, my voice a little sharper than usual. Arthur just nodded, staring into his seltzer. That's what I asked him. He said it was for my protection, for Elena's peace of mind, to prevent any confusion or pain. Pain? They saved me from pain. He was angry, of course, furious. The revelation shattered his world. The perfect, loving family he'd always believed in felt like a carefully constructed illusion. His identity, everything he thought he knew about himself, was suddenly a question mark. After his father passed, Arthur started searching. It wasn't easy. Records were sparse, deliberately obscured. But he was relentless. He felt an almost primal need to find this woman, Elena, the woman whose eyes he saw in that dusty photograph, the woman who was his biological mother. It took him years. He hired private investigators, delved into old town records, followed every faint lead. He traveled across states, chasing ghosts. And finally, after nearly 5 years of tireless searching, he found her. Elena was living in a small coastal town, an hour's drive from here. She had remarried, had 2 other children, a son and a daughter, both grown now. She was an art teacher at a local community college, well respected, seemingly content. Sharon. Your bass tone shall be calm and reflective. Arthur described the moment he saw her for the first time in person. He didn't approach her right away. He just watched her from a distance. She was sketching in a park, surrounded by students. Her hair was silvered now, but her eyes, those same eyes, full of life, wisdom, and a hint of that familiar melancholy. He felt an instant, undeniable connection, a pull he couldn't explain. He deliberated for weeks. What would he say? How would he introduce himself? He imagined all the possible scenarios. Her shock, her anger, her joy, her rejection. The fear of disrupting her peaceful life, of shattering her world, just as his had been shattered. One evening, he finally made up his mind. He went to the community college, waited until her class was over. He walked up to her as she was packing her supplies. "Excuse me," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Are you Elena?" She turned, her eyes widening slightly at the sound of her name from a stranger. "Yes? Can I help you?" He looked into her eyes, those familiar eyes, and for a moment, the words caught in his throat. "My name is Arthur," he finally managed to say. My father was a friend of yours from way back. His name was Arthur's adopted father's name, though Arthur never told me the name, leaving it a blank in the story's tapestry." Elena's face went utterly blank. Then, slowly, a flicker of recognition. Then a dawning horror spread across her features. She stumbled back, dropping her sketch pad. "Arthur?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, it can't be." He knew then. She knew. She remembered. The pact of silence, so carefully kept for decades, was broken. They went to a quiet coffee shop. He told her everything. How his father had confessed on his deathbed, how he had searched for her. He didn't accuse, He didn't demand. He just told his story, his truth. Elena listened, silent tears streaming down her face. She confirmed everything his father had said. The desperation, the impossible choice, the promise. She explained her reasons, how she wanted him to have a life she couldn't give him. She talked about the pain of giving him up, a pain that had never truly left her, even after all these years. She spoke of the hundreds of times she'd wondered about him, if he was happy, healthy, loved. "It was the hardest thing I ever did, Arthur," she told him, her voice thick with emotion. "Every single day, part of me died. But I truly believed it was for your best. I wanted you to have a better life, a stable life." Arthur sat there, listening, watching this woman, his mother, weep. And in that moment, all the anger he'd carried, all the resentment, it began to melt away, replaced by something else. A profound sadness, yes, but also understanding. He told me he realized then that she hadn't abandoned him out of malice or indifference. She had done it out of love, a desperate, sacrificial love that she believed was the only path to his well-being. She had lived with her own secret, her own burden of silence, for just as long as he had lived with the lack of truth. "So what happened next?" I asked Arthur, leaning forward, completely engrossed. He took a long sip of his seltzer, gazing at the condensation on the glass. "We talked for hours and hours. We met again the next day, and the day after that. She introduced me to her children, my half-siblings, as a long-lost family friend. She couldn't bring herself to tell him the full truth. Not yet. Not after all these years. She said she needed time. And I understood. Arthur had found his mother. He had found a part of himself he never knew was missing. But the reunion, as beautiful and painful as it was, wasn't a neat, clean Hollywood ending. It was messy, complicated, full of unspoken words and a delicate dance around a truth that still remained largely hidden from the rest of the world. He continues to visit her. They have their own secret now, their own quiet understanding. His half-siblings treat him kindly, though with a polite distance. Elena occasionally slips up, calls him "my son" by accident, and quickly corrects herself, a pang of guilt in her eyes. It's a fragile piece. Arthur finished his seltzer. He looked at me, a hint of that original sorrow still in his eyes, but now mixed with a quiet dignity. "So, bartender," he said, pushing the empty glass across the counter, "what do you think? Was it right? To keep a secret like that for so long? To protect a child from a truth that ultimately defined him? Or was the lie, no matter how well-intentioned, ultimately more damaging?" He stood up, put some bills on the counter, more than enough. "Some stories," he said, heading for the door, "don't have simple answers, do they?" And he was right. They don't. This one, it's a tough one. A story about family, loyalty, sacrifice, and the heavy, heavy weight of secrets. A story about a mother's desperate love, a father's protective lie, and a son's search for himself. What would you do if you were Arthur, if you were Elena, or even Arthur's adopted parents? There's no easy answer here, folks. Just a lot of gray and a whole lot of heart. So, what's your verdict? How would you navigate a secret that shaped an entire life, for better or worse? I'm just a bartender, serving drinks and listening to tales. But you get to be the judge. Tell me what you think in the comments below.